Lived like a tribal hunter for one day. Primitive skills. At sunrise, I stepped into a lifelong forgotten. No phone, no watch, no gear. Just bare feet on wet soil and the breath of the forest guiding me. I'm here to spend 24 hours living like a primitive tribal hunter, using only what nature provides and what instinct remembers. Every step into the jungle was a step backward in time. The forest wasn't silent, it spoke in Russell's bird calls, cracking branches. I listened not as an outsider, but as someone trying to remember an ancient language. My first task was to track. No guns, no traps, no shortcuts. I searched for broken leaves, scat, claw marks on tree signs that something had passed. The hunt had begun. When the sun climbed higher, I came across a rock with a flat surface and a sharp edge along one side. Holding it firmly, I took a length of bamboo, round at one end, and began to hammer away. I worked slowly and carefully, stopping every few minutes to examine the tip. Finally, I had a makeshift spear point. I looked at the rock in my hands, chipped and scratched from the effort. It wasn't perfect, but in the wild, function is survival. Now I needed a shaft for my spear. Finding a straight branch, I stripped away the leaves and barked until I had a smooth, sturdy piece of wood. I cut it to length using a sharp rock and then carved notches into each end. I secured the spear point into place by wedging some soft wood into the notches. It wasn't like a spear made by expert hands, but it would do. It was time to move. I moved slow, crouched low, studying every shift in wind and light. I wasn't just chasing prey, I was learning to disappear. Hours passed. I didn't catch anything. But then I found wild roots and berries. I'd seen similar ones in old tribal records. I tested cautiously. Hunger teaches patience, but even with the thrill of the hunt, my stomach rumbled with emptiness. As the day heated up, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Wind hid, and the birds fell silent. I found a stream gurgling over rocks and decided to wait near it. Maybe something would come to drink. I settled down on a nearby log and tried to listen to the rhythm of the water. My mind wandered back through time, imagining the tribal people who had lived off the land in this very spot centuries ago. They, too, had hunted and gathered, celebrated and mourned under the canopy of this ancient forest. What did their days look like? How did they survive winters? How did they care for their sick? Their lives so different from mine, yet somehow achingly familiar. Then a flash of movement caught my eye. A small deer emerged from the bushes, ears twitching nervously. It took a few hesitant steps toward the stream, dipped its head to drink, and that was when I made my move. I stood up, spear held tight, and let out a war cry that echoed through the stillness of the forest. The deer shot off into the trees and I hesitated, unsure if I should chase. But something inside me, maybe respect for the animal or the memory of the hunters who came before me, told me to stay put. So I stood there as the forest rustled around me, feeling more connected to this place, to its rhythms, to its history than I ever had before. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows through the trees, I knew I had to get to work building a shelter for the night. I gathered long, sturdy branches and used them as the base, crisscrossing them over a small fire. I layered the structure with vines, leaves, and grass, making sure it was thick enough to keep out the wind and rain. Finally, I covered it all in mud, patting it down to make it as waterproof as possible. Standing back to admire my creation, I felt a surge of pride. Wasn't much to look at, but it was strong and it was mine. I thought of the tribal people who had built shelters just like this, using only their hands and basic materials from the forest. They didn't have hammers, nails, or saws, yet they created homes that protected their families from the elements. What did their days look like? How did they decorate their homes? How did they keep them safe from predators? Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me, whirled around, spear raised, heart pounding in my chest. A small monkey scampered down a tree, chattering loudly as it disappeared into the foliage. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Then a smile crept onto my face. This was real life. Here, danger was real, beauty was real, and so was life itself. Each sound, each shadow, each rustle was a reminder of that. Evening settled over the forest, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air grew cooler and the sounds of the night began to stir. Crickets chirped, frogs croaked, and a lone owl hooted in the distance. I sat outside my shelter, wrapped in a cloak woven from vines, watching the fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. There was a strange comfort in the silence, a connection to something bigger than myself, the rhythm of the forest, the pulse of the earth. It was a humbling experience. I didn't catch any animals today, but I found wild roots and berries. I ate them cautiously. Hunger teaches patience. Fire isn't an option. I have to chew raw, just like those who lived before matches and lighters. As the first stars twinkled in the inky sky above me, I realized how different life must have been for the tribal people. Who lived in this forest, they didn't have fancy equipment or high-tech tools. They survived using nothing but their wits and the resources around them. In a way, I felt like I was stepping into their shoes, experiencing a tiny fraction of what their lives must have been like. My shelter wasn't much to look at, but it was sturdy and dry. I crawled inside and snuggled into a pile of leaves for a pillow. I thought of the generations of people who had slept under the stars, finding refuge in the embrace of the forest. I imagined them lying on the same ground where I was, staring up at the same sky, perhaps sharing stories around a campfire, laughing, singing, dreaming. When the first rays of sunlight peeked through the gaps in my leafy roof, I knew it was time to start the day. The forest was alive with the sounds of birdsong and the buzz of insects. I sat up, stretching out stiff muscles, and yawned widely. After a while, I ventured out of my shelter and took a deep breath. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Looking around, I saw that the forest was alive with activity. Squirrels chattered in the trees, a woodpecker drummed out a steady beat, and a family of deer grazed peacefully in a nearby clearing. It was beautiful. As I began to explore the forest again, I couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship with the tribal people who had lived here before me. They, too, had woken with the sun, gathered food, and respected the rhythms of the forest. They were part of this place, just as I was starting to become. Over the course of the day, I tracked animals, gathered plants, built structures, and learned to read the signs of the forest. I discovered that survival wasn't just about brute strength or advanced technology. It was about observation, patience, and understanding the delicate balance of nature. As the sun began its slow descent, I knew that my 24 hours of living like a tribal hunter were coming to an end. I built another shelter, this time a bit more elaborate, a cone-shaped hut using long grasses and branches. It wasn't much, but it was a testament to what humans can accomplish with nothing but natural materials and a bit of ingenuity. Sitting inside my shelter as darkness fell, I thought about the past 24 hours. I hadn't caught any big game, but I had tracked animals, built spears, gathered plants, and constructed 2 different types of shelters. I had walked barefoot through the forest, listening to its sounds, breathing in its smells, and feeling the earth beneath my feet. As the night deepened, I heard the sounds of the forest around me, the rustling of leaves, the hooting of an owl, the distant roar of a tiger. Fear tugged at me, but mostly I felt a strange sense of belonging. These sounds were the soundtrack of this place, and I was part of it now. I didn't sleep much that night, not with all the creepy crawlies around me. But I didn't need sleep. The forest was my lullaby. It was a gentle reminder of the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. When the first light of dawn touched the forest floor, I knew it was time to go. I took one last look around my shelter, then set off deeper into the woods. I had to find a way out before I became part of the forest. As I walked, I thought about the tribal people who had lived in this area for centuries. They had thrived here, hunted here, and raised their families here. They had a deep understanding of the forest and its creatures. Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard the sound I had been longing for, the distant rumble of a road. Pushing through a final thicket of trees, I saw the road and beyond it, the familiar sights and sounds of the modern world. As I stepped out onto the road, the sun warm on my skin and the sound of traffic in my ears, I knew I was back. But I was changed. I had lived like a tribal hunter for a day, and I had survived. What did I learn from this experience? Survival isn't about strength, it's about awareness, simplicity, respect, and most of all, it's about remembering we were never above nature, we were part of it. This journey has stirred something in me, a desire to understand our past, to reconnect with the rhythms of the earth, and to appreciate the resilience of the human spirit. If this journey has stirred something in you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on my channel, The Forgotten Path.